Hello and welcome to Armen Vartian's presentation. He will be speaking on illegal coins that are illegal to own. And Armen, you can turn on your audio and video now to join us and start getting your presentation set up. There we go. Welcome. You are still muted, Armen, so you will want to fix that before we get started. Okay.
How's that?
There we go. We're good. So we've got a couple different coins that he'll be talking about. Of course, the 33 double eagle that most of us probably know about, but some less commonly heard of ones as well, like the 64 piece dollar and the 74D aluminum cent. So we've got some interesting stories, I'm sure. We actually briefly discussed some illegal to own coins in the 9 o'clock presentation, so we might have a couple people from that one who wanted to learn more.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay, we have it shared from our end.
Okay, great.
So we can just use that one. Okay, so it is your show. Whoops, sorry about that.
That means you have to stay on and do it. I'm sorry, I apologize for that.
All good. I will be muted with the video off. Just vocally cue next slide whenever you're ready to advance. And we'll be running it on our end.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And I apologize for getting a little bit of a late start, but we'll get right into it. I've always liked the subject of illegal to own coins because it brings out a lot of the historical anomalies and sort of physical anomalies that make coins so interesting to me. And I personally have played a small part in many legal matters that relate to the coins that we'll be talking about this morning. So let's get right into it. The next slide has what comes to most people's minds when they think of illegal to own coins. And so what you'll see is I'm going to be showing you pictures, and then I'll have a real short description of the coin and then where the picture is from, just so you get an idea of you'll know what my sources are. So this coin is in the Smithsonian's National Numismatic Collection. And as we'll see in a minute, that's pretty much the only place where anyone is ever going to display one of these. The history of this coin has been gone over and over again so much, and maybe many of you are familiar with it. This is a coin that the United States government has sort of had a crusade against since the 1940s, and anyone who's ever been found to have one has suffered from government action to take it away. And so far, the government has been successful in all but, I guess, half of one case. The coin that, the specimen that Sotheby's sold in the 2002 auction, where half of the proceeds went to the person who owned the coin and half of it went back to the government. That one specimen, the Sotheby's / Stax coin, is legally owned, and by the person who bought it at that auction. As far as I know, he still owns it. And every other specimen, a total of approximately, I think, 23 or 24 other specimens over the years, have all been claimed by the government and returned to the government. Most recently, 10 specimens that were owned by the Langford family in Philadelphia, whose attorney somewhat controversially handed the coins over to the mint for authentication, and then the mint said, "Thank you for giving us our coins back." Litigated for several years, and the end result was there was a trial, and the jury found that the government was entitled to return of these coins. So the question for us this morning is, why are these coins still government property? What's the legal basis for the government's claim against these. Those of you who are advanced collectors know that if you can find a 1931 saint or a 32, you can own them. They're hard to find. Most of them were melted down. But if you could find one, there's no legal restriction on that. Nor is there a restriction on owning a 1933 eagle, which are very expensive coins, very nice coins, hard to find, perfectly legal to own. So people who aren't really familiar with the way that these court cases against the Langbirds and others operated, they might think, well, there must be some law specifically with respect to this coin. And the answer is there isn't. But what there is a government claim that the coins were stolen. And if the coins were stolen from the mint, from the United States government, then like any other piece of stolen property, the owner, in this case, the United States government, would be entitled to pursue their return. So the case against the Langbirds, for example, was not a criminal case, it was a civil case. And the case that eventually led to the Sotheby's/Stax piece being sold at auction began as a criminal case where the coin was seized when it came to New York, but the criminal case was dropped very quickly, and that also became a civil case. And the government's argument is simply, we have better title to this coin than the person who's currently possessing it. As if someone stole a bicycle from your backyard, and then you saw the bicycle down the street in someone else's yard. In theory, you could go bring a court action and say, that's my bicycle. And that's the theory that the government is making. And it sounds, much simpler than it actually is, and lots of money is involved. But that's essentially what the government's position is with respect to this 1933 saint. The trial of the cases that we've had involve a lot of testimony as to whether one of these could legally have left the mint, with legally meaning not stolen. And quite a lot of testimony went to that because there was apparently a small window of time when the coins were available at the mint's cashier's office in Philadelphia before FDR's executive order that restrained any government agencies from paying out gold in the order from 1933. So during that period of time, at least in theory, someone, we were told in the testimony, could have walked up to that window, put $20 down in some other form of either paper, money, or other gold coins, and walked away with one of these 1933 specimens. It's important to keep in mind that as of that moment, nobody would have thought that these would have any future significance to collectors. They happened to be the last in the series before the United States went off the gold standard, or at least off the legal obligation to pay out gold. So back in 1933, no one would have thought anything special about these, and it's important to keep in mind that FDR's executive orders were not thought to be permanent. So there was no particular idea that the United States would never have gold coinage again. So the coins that were sitting there at the mint, in theory, could have been released later in the year or 2 years later back into circulation. And this becomes important as we consider, and I'll say this, the theoretical possibility that more of these coins exist outside the United States. Because the United States government, some of you may know, continued to pay foreign debts in gold coins all the way into the 1970s before that finally stopped under President Nixon. So there were millions of United States gold coins in Europe, for example, and a lot of other countries around the world. And for someone at the Federal Reserve who was servicing orders to foreign banks, the 1933 saints were no different from the 32 or the 31 saints back at the time. Nobody would have considered, oh, well, we shouldn't use these because these were never legally issued. They were just ounces of gold, I mean, literally. So it is possible, and of course, I don't know of any specific ones, but it's possible one of these would have been in a gold shipment, and if that's the case, then it left the mint legally and would actually be legal to own, because if you could prove that's how it left the United States, then it wouldn't have been stolen. The reason why the government, and this actually leads into why did the government settle with the owner of the Stax Sotheby's specimen. And the reason why the government settled with that person and let that person have half of the money was because there was an argument that that particular specimen had previously been owned by King Farouk of Egypt. And King Farouk, who was a very advanced coin collector, wanted one of these, bought one, and arranged to get an export license to have it leave the United States to go to him in Egypt. Now, the argument was made by, again, the person who owned this particular specimen back in 2002, that his coin was that same coin. It was the one that King Farouk used to own. And there is some evidence for that because apparently he acquired the coin from someone in Egypt. Well, if it was that same coin, then the legal argument is that the United States government had the opportunity to seize that coin at the time that it granted the export license, but it chose not to. So it abandoned its property claim to the coin when it allowed the coin to leave the country. And because the government was afraid it might lose that case, it settled and it split the proceeds of the coin 50-50. The coin, I might have mentioned this before, but it sold for $7.5 million, and the government took half and gave half to the person who possessed the coin. If you're thinking about, well, how did they get the other 20 or so that have been seized? All of the coins that the government has seized in the United States, and let's exclude the Sotheby's one for a minute. All of the other ones all pass through the same dealer in Philadelphia, a man named Israel Swit. So Israel Swit at one point had all of those particular specimens. And the government's theory is that he had an arrangement with somebody who worked inside the mint, and that person allowed him to get these coins after it was no longer legally, mint was no longer legally permitted to let those coins out. So one of the things that's always fascinated me about that story is that each time the government says, okay, Mr. Swit only had 10 of them, and then 2 more show up and they said, okay, Mr. Swit only had 12 of them. And then the 10 Langboard specimens came out, and the Langboard family is directly descended from Israel Swit. And so they have to say, okay, there were 10 more that Swit must have had. And who knows if he had even more than that we just haven't heard about yet. So, so the bottom line is the government doesn't pursue people who have these coins as criminals, as thieves. They pursue them simply as somebody whose property rights are less than the United States government's own property rights. So are there other coins that the government feels the same way about, that feels that it has superior rights to? And the answer is there are actually quite a few that have the same type of story that the 1933 saint would have. Now, let's start with the Class II 1804 dollar, because what we're doing is we're looking at coins that were never issued as legal tender, but somehow left the mint for different reasons. And the Class II 1804 dollar has a particular story, and I don't want to sort of indulge in the stories of all of these coins, but I've picked coins where the reasons for them being struck are either unclear, completely unknown, or something that the mint authorities wouldn't have been authorized to do. And the Class II 1804 dollar is one of those. There was no congressional authority that was given to the US Mint to make these coins. They're not the Class I specimens, which were made as gifts for foreign dignitaries. These were made by the mint and handed out to collectors without any, or maybe sold to collectors, handed out or sold, without any authority from US Congress for them to have been struck. So the United States government is very, very clear that only Congress can authorize a federal official to give out federal property or to sell federal property. And I've seen this several times, and we'll see some of the examples coming up, where the government has taken the position, yes, I know you have a letter from some government official saying it was okay for you to have this, but that person wasn't authorized to write that letter. So we all know and love the 1804 dollar. It's one of the great American rarities. This specimen is in the Smithsonian, but there are several specimens have been bought and sold over the years. What would stop the United States government from grabbing one of these or trying to grab one of those? We'll get to that when we run through some of the others. But my point is, there's no difference. 200, well, it hasn't been quite 200 years since this was made, but since 1834, when these were made, to the present, versus 1933 to the present, in terms of the government's legal position as to ownership. So, Leanna, the next slide, please. So here we have a stela, and I would ask for a. I'm not seeing the raising hands, but I would ask for a show of hands from people who know the story of how of why it is that collectors are able to own stelas, or how collectors got stelas. But suffice it to say that these were prototypes. These were coins that were struck by the mint for particular use. And basically, they were struck with a weight in the metric system as opposed to the English system, so that they would be more easily used for trade in countries that use the metric system. A number of them were handed out to members of Congress as the government was asking Congress to consider authorizing them, and the end result was Congress didn't authorize these coins, but members of Congress still ended up with them. And we'll see that story later with one of the other coins. And so there are an extremely small number of these flowing hair stelas that's pictured here, and that picture comes from PCS Coin Facts. Very few of these, more of the 1880s, or I could have that wrong, but there are very few hundred total from 1879 and 1880. And the values are in the 6 figures and higher for both designs and for both years. But they were never issued as legal tender. And the government did try to get these back when the samples were given out to members of Congress, and it got some of them back, but not all of them. So the ones that are out in the in circulation or among collectors in the marketplace, in theory, the government could say, well, no one authorized the mint official who went to Congress to just give these to people, to give up the government's title to them. Instead, this person did that and should have gotten them all back. And so if you have one, never issued as legal tender, Congress never authorized them to be given out. Congress never authorized them at all. So we have Stellas. Now, Leanna, what's the next one? Okay, the 94 S. Barber dime, and this is a picture from Heritage. I actually bought one of these for a client at a Heritage auction a few decades ago for the incredible price of $225,000, which at the time people thought was way more than it was worth, and that same coin is probably worth over $2 million today. So very good investment. So 94 S dimes, again, it's the story of how these were made fits perfectly within the stories of coins not authorized by Congress. Congress did not authorize the San Francisco Mint to make dimes that year, and yet we're aware of, I think we're aware of all 24 that were struck, and we know more or less why they were struck. They were struck because there were dignitaries that were visiting the mint, and the mint director decided to give them something to take away with them. And there's even a story which I believe has been proved to be apocryphal of the mint director's daughter buying an ice cream with one of them. But the fact remains that Congress did not authorize these coins to be made, and yet they exist. And they are some of America's great rarities, but there is no ground for somebody to say that the United States government has authorized private ownership of this coin. And after I run through kind of some of these coins, we'll talk about, well, what would happen if the government actually brought a case? So let's go to the next slide. Of course, here's one, the 13 Liberty nickel. Books have been written about this, but if we only speculate as to how and when these were made. There is no official story about it, and the United States Mint has never admitted that these were made, and they weren't made with any authority. There were no Liberty nickels in 1913. There were Indian/Buffalo nickels. So one of the theories for why these were made is that they were actually made at the behest of a coin dealer who miraculously had all 5 of them at one period of time and was the first dealer to sell them. One of the truly great American rarities. Let's put the nickel back for now, please, Liana. So the 13 nickel is one of the great rarities, but there is no basis for somebody to ever say that Congress authorized them, because we don't even know the circumstances of them being made. Thank you. So okay, so these coins, the Stellas, the 13 Liberty nickel, the 94S dime, $1804. These have been bought and sold fairly with a fairly great amount of publicity over a long period of time. So the United States government knows that these are out there, and they know that ownership of them is being transferred for prices in the millions of dollars, and they haven't done anything about it. So would that prevent the United States from doing something in the future about these? And as an attorney, I would certainly make that argument, but believe it or not, there is a federal law that says the government cannot give up its property right to government property except by act of Congress. So that the purpose of that, I've had to deal with that in a case which I'll tell you about in a minute. But the reason for that is because if a government employee were to take some property and sell it out to somebody outside the government wouldn't necessarily know that that was the case for some time, and the circumstances of how those items left government hands wouldn't necessarily be known for a long time. And so there's no statute of limitations that applies to the government reclaiming its property. I came across this when I was representing Apollo astronauts, when NASA was trying to get back all the mementos that these men had been given during their service, some really interesting space collectible items. And I argued in court that, well, the government is just saying, we have superior title to you for this item, and there's a limitations period for that. And these were items that these people were given. One example is one astronaut was given the camera that had been bolted to the outside of the lunar module when he was on the moon. And the idea was that camera was supposed to stay on the moon. It was supposed to actually get wrecked when the lunar module crash landed there. But for various circumstances, it ended up coming back to Earth, and they put it on a plaque, mounted it, and gave it to him. And then they wanted it back. In the 2000s now, they wanted it back. So somebody would say, well, of course you knew that he had these. Why shouldn't you be subject to the, I forget what it is, 4-year statute of limitations for recovering those things? And the government argued, and the court agreed with them, well, there is no statute of limitations. So this man was given this item in the 1970s, and here we are in the 2000 teens, the government was demanding it back. And that issue, which involved several of the Apollo astronauts who are still living, was only resolved when we went to Congress and got Congress to pass a specific law saying anything that the Apollo astronauts got during their service was theirs, that the US government was releasing its claim to them. But it took a specific act of Congress to accomplish that. So although if I were the owner of a 13 Liberty nickel and I had paid, say, $3, $4, $5 million for it, I would say, if you want this back, you'll have to compensate me, or I've got to fight you in court. In theory, the government could still win that case, just like it probably would have won the case against my Apollo astronauts. But I think concerns of public relations caused the government to step back a minute, and then members of Congress said, no, this is absurd. We'll pass a law saying you're going to leave these servicemen alone. If they want to sell some of their stuff or own it, that's fine. A similar law to the one for the Apollo astronauts has been proposed to protect coins like this, these rarities, and to my knowledge, it's never gotten out of the committee stage. So there is no similar law that protects the owners of these coins. So let's go and look at some more modern pieces. Leon, the next slide, please. So now we're in something that's in my lifetime and many of yours, I'm sure. The 1974 aluminum cent is a rarity. It's similar to the Stella in that it's a prototype coin that was made by the mint for a specific purpose. At that time, there was a shortage of copper, and they wanted to use aluminum to make cents. And so they made a number of them at the Philadelphia Mint and took them to a congressional committee, handed them out to the members of Congress, I think both the Senate and the House of Representatives, if I remember correctly. And then the government made some attempts to get them back afterwards. And some members, and this is all documented, some members of Congress got their letters and returned the coins, and other members of Congress didn't. There is one specimen of the 74 aluminum cent that has been graded by PCGS, and it was submitted by, well, it was received by a U.S. Capitol policeman who got it from a member of Congress, one of the people who acquired it. At least that's what we suspect was how he got it. And I think he would win a case against the government. The government hasn't ever tried to get it back. I recall when PCGS certified it, there was quite a bit of publicity. And so the government knows about it. And I believe he would win that case because I believe that even if the member of, even if the mint employee, if the government said, well, this mint employee shouldn't have given it to the member of Congress, the member of Congress then handed it over to this person, and this person, I think, would win his case because the government knew that this member of Congress hadn't returned it and didn't do anything about it. And so I'd like to represent this person or his family whenever that happens, but right now the coin is being held peacefully, and the government's made no attempt to get it. Now, probably many of you have noticed that the coin that's on the screen is not the one I've just been talking about, because it has a D mint mark, so it was struck in Denver and not in Philadelphia. This is a different coin, and this coin is a coin I was involved with as an attorney. The picture comes from PCGS because when my client called me to say that he had one, I had him submit it to PCGS just to make sure it was genuine. And they were, at PCGS, were very surprised to see it because there was no known record. And there still is no known record of aluminum cents being made in Denver. But the story of the coin is fairly simple. The person that my client received it from is the son of the deputy superintendent of the Denver Mint at the time. So apparently, and there's no documentation of this, several pieces were struck so that the Denver Mint staff could see how aluminum blanks would work in their presses. And it was, in fact, one of the reasons these coins were never made for circulation is because aluminum is so light, it doesn't respond to the presses as well as the heavier copper coins did. And the other main reason, which some of you might know who are collectors, is they'd never work in vending machines. And that's the main reason why these aluminum cents were never made, is they were too light for vending machines. But they were also very light in running through the mint's striking machines, presses. And so the Denver Mint decided they had some aluminum that had been sent to them from Philadelphia, and they decided to run a few, of which this was one. And the assistant superintendent died and left a few coins, miscellaneous coins, to his family, of which this happened to be one of them. And some of the other ones were error coins, but this happened to be one of them. So PCGS graded it. It was put into a heritage auction, and then the United States Mint showed up and said, "This is ours, we want it back." And even though nobody was still alive who could testify as to how this was made and when it was made and why and all that, we pieced some of that together during the course of the litigation, and ultimately it was decided that the coin would be donated, would go back to the Smithsonian, and that being my clients was mostly trying to protect the reputation of his customer's father, the one who was the Mint assistant superintendent, and the government agreed there was no reason to think that he had done anything wrong, that upon his retirement he was allowed to keep certain items that were made while he was there, and this was one of them. So yes, the superintendent in Denver was not authorized to let him keep this, but neither was he a thief. So having established all of that with the government, they turned the coin over, and there it sits with at the Smithsonian. So the next slide is just for fun. What does a 64D peace dollar look like? Well, I don't know, and I would certainly love to hear from anybody who's ever seen one of these, but it's always been, there's a constant rumor that the Denver Mint made peace dollars in 1964. I think the government would have a very good claim if somebody showed up with one of those, but you'd have to explain how you got it. And that's the bottom line for all of these situations, is you would have to explain how you receive these coins. The next slide, Liana, brings us to, so here we have two presidential dollars. There's a Washington, and then I think the other one is Harrison. Much more recent situations. It turned out that these are the coins that have missing edge lettering. So the motto, "In God We Trust," was put on the edges of these coins because there was no room for it on the obverse or the reverse. And for the George Washington ones, there were a certain number of the coins which, by mistake, were allowed out into circulation without the edge lettering being done. The process was such that the coin was struck and then the edge lettering was put on afterwards. And in some cases, the coins left the mint before the edge lettering could be put on. So those, when it was discovered that that happened, those became valuable rarities. Nobody knew quite how many there were. Eventually, the Mint started trying to figure that out. But someone who, a policeman, someone who worked at the Mint, decided that he would create some of these rarities, make some money for himself on the side by taking some of the coins before the edge lettering had been put on for himself, and actually leaving the premises with them and selling them, which he did successfully for a period of time, not just with Washington's, but with the Adamses and Jeffersons and later on. So the reason I pick the Harrison coin, which is on the next slide, is because eventually the Mint, started investigating this, and it with the Washingtons, it's more or less impossible to know which are the legitimate errors that the Mint allowed to leave legally, and which are the ones that don't have the edge lettering because the Mint person took them out illicitly. And by the time you get to Harrison, the Mint had done a fairly good job of not making the mistakes. And it's more likely, and so as you go further on into the presidents, further on into the years, it's more likely, if you have one of these, that it came from the illicit acts of the Mint employee and not just a inadvertence of the United States Mint. But because it could be either one, it could be either the Mint's fault or it could be from this illicit activity, the Mint has never pursued recovery of any of these. They issued a statement. They've issued a statement saying that they consider these to be stolen if any coins came through this person, but they've never done anything to try and recover any of them. And I think the reason for that is because they would have to show, well, this just wasn't a mistake. And there's no particular way to identify, if you're looking at this particular specimen, for example, which it is. So they've allowed these to, the value of them has dropped quite a bit. These used to be really expensive coins originally. The value has dropped, but the Mint has never done anything to try and get them back. They seem really uninterested in that. Okay, the next topic I want to talk about is counterfeit coins. So here's a coin that I own. I have it on my desk right here. So it purports to be an 1885 CC Morgan dollar. Now, this is not an easy coin to find, and it's not an easy coin to find in circulated condition. But I bought 3 of them from someone in China for $11. Now, I was doing that in part because I was working for a client who was trying to establish that these people in China were making counterfeit coins. And clearly, this is a counterfeit coin. And the other 2 that I got along with it are counterfeit coins. There was somebody there who was essentially making coins to order. And you could say, I wanted 1885 CC, and they would send you one. So what's the story with counterfeit coins? You can't make them. That's a crime. You can't sell them. That's a crime. But it is not a crime to have one. The government motivation in making counterfeit coins illegal to make or to sell is to keep people from making coins to put into circulation and debase our currency. So that's a crime, but having one is not. And the only law that applies to let's say, replicas of coins, coins that are made not for the idea of actually spending it, but for the idea of selling it as a collectible, is the Hobby Protection Act. And the coin that's on the next slide is reflective of that. So the Hobby Protection Act regulates making replicas of coins, anything that looks like an actual United States coin, or it purports to be an actual United States coin, but isn't. This item is a replica coin, and because of the Hobby Protection Act, it is legal to buy and sell, and also even actually to make in the United States, provided that the word copy is printed on it. And if you look at the eagle's shield on the reverse of the coin, you'll see the word copy. So it's a fascinating area of practice. I spend, over the years, I've spent actually a lot of time working on issues involving the Hobby Protection Act, because you wonder why there is even a law that allows you to make these replicas with the word copy, but that it's a recognition that collectors like these, and they're allowed to be made, provided that the coin itself doesn't create the possibility for misrepresentation, where somebody might buy this thinking that it's genuine, and the word copy, the size of the lettering and the positioning of the lettering is somewhat regulated. There are regulations that say it has to be, conspicuous, and the size, it has to be a certain size. I've represented people over the years in making replica coins that have shields like this, and I always tell them to put copy right where this one is. Well, even though this is not a client of mine, but it seems a perfect place to put the word copy. It's very visible, and it's a part of the field where there isn't any design. The Hobby Protection Act used to only regulate importing replica coins, and in a amendment a few years back that I had a lot to do with writing and lobbying for, they also extended it to the sale of replicas in the United States. So any coin which is a replica of an actual US coin is regulated. Now, I want to move on in the time we have left to talking about ancient coins, cultural property, because currently there's a lot of controversy over the ability of foreign governments who want their ancient property back, their cultural property, to be able to come to the United States courts or come to the US Customs and get these coins away from American collectors. And I've been involved in a long-running lawsuit where a few dealers in ancient coins imported some into the United States on purpose for them to be seized so that they could fight court cases. And we haven't done very well in the court, but it's important to understand that ancient coins have a particular problem that none of these American coins that we've talked about before have, which is that foreign countries determine whether or not those coins would be subject to seizure in the United States. So these are Greek coins, and the government of Greece gets to say if a coin is more than 250 years old, a Greek coin, then it's our cultural property, it's our patrimony, and if we demand it back, then we want people to give it back. Now, the United States only goes so far in helping foreign countries get their cultural property back. So we have our own laws in the United States. Firstly, so the law, the text of the law, requires the foreign country to establish that the coin has either been stolen, like from a museum or a church or something in Greece, or that it was looted, so that it was dug up out of the ground and exported out of Greece without the proper export license, the proper permit. So in theory, our law requires the foreign government to prove those things. And in some cases, foreign governments have proved that coins were stolen and then those coins were repatriated. But most of the time, that's not how it works. Most of the time, they just say, here is a list of coins. They give the State Department a list of coins and say, here are the types of coins that get looted and illegally exported from our country. And the State Department accepts that list. There's a committee of people, including collectors and museum officials and stuff, that look it over and say, okay, this looks okay to us. These are the types of coins that get dug up and exported illegally. So when those coins are brought into the United States, or someone attempts to bring them in, US Customs will stop them to look at the list. If they see the coins on the list, then they will seize those coins. And if the owner of the coins wants to fight about it in court, the government initiates a forfeiture procedure in federal court, and the court will decide, do these get forfeited? And that's the case that I was working on as a friend of the court for a group of ancient coin dealers. The next slide shows some actual coins that were taken from an American collector. Even though the coins are of Greek design, it was the government of Turkey that demanded that they be returned. The coins were seized at a coin show in New York City. And although a court never came to a final determination, there was an agreement that was made where the collector, or the dealer who owned them, gave them up. Or actually, it was a collector, gave them up. So there was never any finding that these particular coins were stolen. It was just the people involved, the dealer who owned them, and the person the collector who owned them, and the dealer that collector got them from, could not document when those coins left Turkey. And the best defense, really the only defense that a collector of ancient coins has in a case where the coins are on the foreign country's cultural property list, the only defense is to be able to establish that the coins had already left that country before the laws took effect, which is more or less 1983. So if you can establish that the coin that you have was already in the marketplace, was already being bought and sold by collectors prior to that date, then even though the foreign country might think it's cultural property, the United States law does not authorize the United States government to help that country get the coins back. So it's very important when you're dealing with ancient coins that you insist on getting provenance information from the person that you're buying them from. And even if you didn't do that at the time of the transaction, if you have ancient coins, you should ask whoever you bought them from, what provenance information do you have? If the coin, like I said, if it was outside of Greece or Turkey or China, whichever country is involved, before the United States law took effect, then you're good. If it wasn't, once the coin is here, you're probably safe, but you won't be able to import those coins in. And I say that as an alert to people who buy coins in foreign auctions. is you might have trouble bringing those back if they're not documented. I don't agree with the way the system works. I don't agree with the way that the court cases I've been involved with ended, because I think the United States gives way too much deference to foreign countries in terms of the benefit of the doubt as to when these coins left. And even the fact that, like I noticed earlier this week, somebody in Ireland found a 1,000-year-old Russian coin, Russian Viking coin there. If Russia wants that back, would any country really help Russia get that back when the coin was found in Ireland? So chances are it left Russia a long time ago. So those are situations where I think the government should have to, the foreign government should have to have a higher burden of proof to show there was looting involved, and not just, well, we don't know 2,000 years later what the history of this coin was. We just have a few more minutes. So on that note, I would see, are there any questions that I can answer? Leanna, I'm not sure how this works.
Yes, we do have some questions. We won't be able to get to all of them, so I'm just going to pick out a few from the Q&A. Let's see. Let's go with, is the government trying to confiscate the Stellas? And if not, why are they treating them differently than the 1933 gold coins?
Well, the difference with the Stellas is that they were actually handed out. So there's some story, if you traced back, if you were able to trace back the provenance of any particular Stella, you would get to the congressional committee. You wouldn't get to this place where we don't know how it got out of the mint. And that's, you know, for better or worse, for the 1933 20s, we don't know how they got out. And the government says this guy, Israel Swit, had a deal with the mint employee to steal them. So that's the basic distinction there.
Okay, let's see, we have another one. Why are pattern coins any different from the Stella and 1974D aluminum cent? I see pattern coins for sale all the time.
Pattern coins, they are or are not different. Patterns, in many cases, were sold by the mint. So there were lists where a collector could get a list of pattern coins for sale and buy them. And there was a kind of a famous case a little more than 100 years ago where one great collector of patterns, Captain John Heseltine, had his collection of patterns, and the government tried to get them back, and he was successful against them. He was able to retain his collection because he said, here's the price list where I bought these from you. So you were offering them for sale, and if you're going to offer them for sale publicly, then I should be entitled to keep them. And so it's one of those situations where I guess kind of like the Stax 3320, if it could go either way, or the missing edge lettering presidentials, if it could go either way, the government usually leaves those alone. And that's where patterns fit in. Thanks for the question.
Okay, let's do one more question and then we're gonna have to wrap it up because we are at an hour. But there is a double-headed 1859 cent mule currently up for auction at Heritage. Is that legal? Clearly it was tomfoolery at the mint, was not authorized by Congress, and nowhere upon it does it state a denomination.
Would I dare render an opinion about something that's currently for auction? My friends at Heritage would not like that. But clearly, tomfoolery is probably the thing. But I guess I'm going to go and read the description of that now and see how they describe it. But that would be one that if it weren't that old, if it was something that was more recent, the mint would probably want it back. But somebody would say, well, but maybe it's just an error. So I think what we see here is the mint is not going to want to get involved, except that they want to deter people currently working there from stealing stuff, from doing things like that. And in a case like this, I guess they feel they're covered. They don't need to get that coin back. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you for everyone who sent in questions. We had quite a few that we didn't get to, unfortunately. But thank you all for watching, and it's been a great time. So do you have any closing remarks, Armen?
No, I keep collecting those rare coins.
Okay, well, then we currently have a presentation from Malcolm Matthias going, if you want to hop in on that one near the beginning. Otherwise, hope to see you later in the symposium. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.